Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we have another update on Amritpal Singh's situation. We also discover how a British-era legal loophole is allowing rape of women to happen legally in India. And some more interesting information on the Caste story that we've been covering. Also some interesting news about Canadian military resources being redirected to help Sikhs in the Afghan withdrawal. And in response to a request from one of our commenters, a tribute to the massive Sikh contribution during the last two world wars. So joining me for Perspectives as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and to the amazing viewers out there. Keep those messages coming in. We love to read them, and we're happy to have you here.
And as always, together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at a large batch of your great comments, which you've very kindly been sending in by the bucketful. Thank you so much for those. And as always, we'll be discussing the points that you've raised with our own thoughts and perspectives. And a reminder that if you'd like to send a short video of yourselves talking about any topic you'd like to raise, do send it into our email address at the end. And if we like it, we will broadcast it. Don't be shy. You know you really want to. So in the meantime, though, let's get on with the show. And to kick us off, as always, James, what have you got for us today?
Well, here in Canada, we have another hot button topic, and that has to do with the withdrawal of troops and evacuations out of Afghanistan 3 years ago. The story that I'm going to share here on the screen is actually from the Canadian press, and it was aired on CTV, which is one of our national news networks here in Canada. And essentially what has transpired is that when the troops 3 years ago were evacuating personnel as well as support workers and Canadian interpreters and so forth from Afghanistan and the Kabul region, there were troops that went to rescue a group of about 200 Sikhs who were also at risk of persecution had they been left in the country without assistance evacuating. Because Mr. Sajjan was the defense minister here in Canada and the head of the Canadian military, he happens to be Sikh, and people were making accusations that he redirected Canadian military resources for that purpose or for that reason is because they were Sikh. However, he has come back and disputed that, making very clear that all chains of command, all proper steps and resources were distributed and used in all manners relating and supporting the processes in place by the Canadian government and the Canadian military. He goes on to state here in the report, and again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is on the screen if anybody wants to pause it and read it themselves or go to ctv.ca and read it. And essentially, he's just going on to clarify that it was very, very important that these individuals were rescued. Now, at the end of the day, he left it to the boots on the ground and the commanders and coordinators to decide how, when, and with which resources to rescue these individuals. It was through here that you can see on the screen that it was through the Manmeet Singh Bular Foundation that he was informed of these individuals and their need to be rescued. By the time the Canadian Armed Forces did actually get to a point of initiating the rescue, they had actually been evacuated out of the country through other resources and other means. So the Canadian military was not even utilized in the actual evacuation of these individuals from Afghanistan. But again, he's taking heat. There is an election next year. People are coming up and just, really throwing the dirt at him. Just again, claiming that it was racially motivated or because he was Sikh that he sent those resources. But the truth is that he followed every chain of command that was supposed to be followed. He followed every procedure and every process in place by the Government of Canada and the Canadian military. So it's very important that this is clarified and cleared up because there's just so much BS being slung at him for doing his job. And again, he did it properly and he should be commended for trying to make that rescue happen, as we did for all the other individuals that the Canadian government was aware of that needed to be evacuated under very dire and very difficult circumstances. So I'll send that back to you for your comments. Angus, what do you think about that and how it's played out?
Yeah, it's interesting that whole evacuation from Afghanistan, it was an absolute, and I'm not going to use the word because we are broadcasting public, but it was a disaster from all accounts. The British, the US, particularly the US, the Canadians, everybody withdrew in an absolute hurry, essentially because the Biden administration decided that we must withdraw from Afghanistan. Snap decision, and it was absolute chaos. And there is a quote in that article that you showed up there. It was chaos on the ground. It was absolute chaos. And you've got the military trying to undertake a very, very difficult operation under intense pressure. But also, they are being pulled from pillar to post. They have boots on the ground, which have all sorts of complexities and difficult decision making to make. But at the same time, they are being pulled by their commanders back in HQ, who are in turn being commanded by politicians with these snap decisions based on political decisions, based on political criteria, not military or not operational criteria. So these poor soldiers who are caught in the middle are having to make snap decisions themselves, for which they are then held responsible and accountable, sometimes years later, and essentially are often scapegoated for these. So it's very hard to know what actually is the truth here. Yes, elections, as always, politicians slinging mud around, slinging smears. It's easy to try and misdirect blame, especially if you have a hand in that blame. Yeah, it's very hard to know what the truth is here. I tend to side on the whole with the military rather than politicians, because the military are on the whole black and white. They have orders, they follow orders. They're not politically, generally speaking, not politically motivated. They are soldiers. They do what they're trained to do and they do what they are ordered to do. So one always has to look up the chain of command. If something has gone wrong, then it's either a human mistake or there has been an order issued which was itself at fault. So yeah, I'm afraid my my opinion is pretty clear that most of the fault here lies all the way back up the chain to the politicians. The military is simply a tool of the politicians, and if things go wrong on the ground, it's usually because it was a bad political decision. So yeah, James, I'm afraid it's very easy for these armchair warriors to make retrospective judgments, but they weren't there on the ground. They weren't the people making those difficult decisions on the ground and having to decide literally who lives and who dies.
Absolutely, and I really find it distasteful that they are using the men and women of our armed forces to try and gain political favor with the public. I mean, when they sign up for military service, and this is for any country, they are there to do a job. They are there to follow orders. They sign up to risk their lives, their limbs, and everything in the sake of not only protecting our country, but bringing peace around the world. They do not sign up saying, I'll come and defend our country, or I'll come and help this, world peace, if I agree with it. That's not how it works. They sign up, they write a blank check and say, this is for my life. I'm willing to give it all in, help for humanity. And that's what it comes down to. And I just find it distasteful that they are politicizing this and demeaning the troops that did the work on the ground in such difficult situation, and the leadership that it took to get us through a chaotic situation there.
Yeah, and how often have we uncovered the fact that it's when politics gets involved in anything, whether it's the law, whether it's the military or anything, things usually go very wrong. So yeah, thank you for that, James. An interesting story.
Yeah, and every life is worth saving. I don't care what the background was. We had a rescue mission in place. We had an obligation to rescue people and not leave them there to face persecution and torture or death, so.
Interesting there also.
That's where we'll leave it there.
Yeah, it did refer in that article to Hindus as well being rescued. So it wasn't, although Sikhs clearly were the main issue at hand, Hindus were involved in that rescue as well. So it's a very cynical, accusation being thrown around. So. Okay, let's move on to my first story, and this is just an update on Amritpal Singh, and I must credit Lovepreet Kaur once again for her highlighting this story, and this is the latest update on Amritpal Singh. And of course, everybody knows that Amritpal Singh was elected under the recent general election to lead the Kador Sahib constituency up in the Punjab. And he, of course, resides in Dibrugarh jail over in Assam. And he has written a letter, which has been forwarded by the Punjabi government. And this letter has been written to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, the lower house of the Indian Parliament. And this letter requests permission to take his oath as a Member of Parliament. This is his democratic right under the election laws. So Amritpal Singh, who is the chief of the Warriors Punjab Day organisation, he wrote this letter from his jail cell in Dibrugarh. And of course, he's residing in that jail cell under the contentious National Security Act. And this was after registering a thumping victory, and I love that description, a thumping victory in the recent elections, where he managed to secure nearly 200,000 more votes than his nearest rival. That was the Congress candidate, Kulbir Singh Zira. And he's been seeking permission under the NSA's Section 15, and apparently this was lodged sometime almost 2 weeks ago. Now, his lawyer and former MP advocate Rajdev Singh Khalsa has released the following statement saying, "The Home Secretary of Punjab has forwarded this letter to the Lok Sabha Speaker, Om Birla. Now, the Speaker is to act on this and decide about Amritpal's oath-taking within a 60-day period, which started from June the 25th. As per the procedure, the Speaker takes advice from the Home Department of Centre before taking the decision." That may be an interesting discussion point there. On Monday, the National Investigation Agency, the NIA, gave consent for jailed Kashmiri leader Sheikh Abdul Rashid, known as Engineer Rashid, to take his oath as a Lok Sabha member on July the 25th. Now, Engineer Rashid, he's also residing in jail, and he's been in jail since 2019, but he was actually charged by the NIA under another piece of pretty draconian legislation, the UAPA. Now, the UAPA, like the NSA, is one of these very, very catch-all pieces of legislation that essentially hands the Indian government almost unlimited arbitrary powers to detain people. Now, the UAPA is the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and it was aimed at, under its own terms, the Unlawful Activities Association in India is preventing unlawful activities within India. Its main objective was to make powers available for dealing with activities directed against the integrity and sovereignty of India. Well, what a loose description that is. But anyway, so Engineer Rashid was jailed under the UAPA, but he has been allowed to take his oath. Why hasn't Amritpal Singh? Now, Rashid, he was elected in J&K in Jammu and Kashmir. He defeated the former J&K Chief Minister Omar Abdullah to win his Lok Sabha election in the Baramulla seat as an independent. So after both developments, a glimmer of hope has emerged about the parole of Amritpal Singh, who was detained, of course, for more than a year. With his 9 colleagues, the NSA invoked against him for running a drive against drugs and spreading Sikh ethos in the Punjab, which were termed as terror activities by the Indian government. Well, yeah, I mean, we've talked at great length about the poor justification for his detention. But yeah, interesting. So a letter has been submitted, and the quote from his lawyer that the Speaker has to talk to the Home Department of Centre before he can make a decision. In other words, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha has to seek permission, essentially, from the Indian government before he will allow Amritpal Singh to take his oath. I think we can all foresee what's going to happen there. This is, once again, it's politicising, it's weaponising the legal process. I think it's a fairly safe bet what's going to happen, James. Clearly, they do not want Amritpal Singh in any way, shape or form to be released, even to take his oath in the Lok Sabha. What do you think?
I think it just shows that the power needs to be drawn back a bit and there has to be accountability. If you look at this particular incident, how many others are rotting in jail cells that don't have the ability to get their voice heard? So, he's just one of many that this issue represents and is applied to. So something's got to give, and that goes to international law that needs to be respected in a democracy. He needs to be released, and he needs to be taking part in the process as the people have elected him to do so.
Yeah, I mean, what a great point. I mean, Amritpal Singh is a very high-profile character, but think of all the other people residing in Indian jails without trial under these dreadful pieces of undemocratic legislation. Who's speaking up for them? They don't have huge advocates. They can't afford expensive lawyers. They're residing in jail cells indefinitely. Who's going to fight for them? There is something deeply tainted about the Indian legal process that has allowed these dreadful pieces of legislation to exist and has handed the Indian government this arbitrary power to lock up its political opponents under some drummed up, really contentious justification. It stinks, frankly. And Jagtar Singh Johal, who we will talk about later when we come onto the comments section, another person residing in Indian jail. He's a British citizen. Again, fortunately, he has a large following, so he has a lot of people advocating for his release, but he still resides in jail 7 years later. So, yeah, it's a dark stain on India, this, and it shocks me that the West isn't doing more about this. We fate Narendra Modi. We shake his hands in front of the world's cameras. We try to do trade deals. But are we talking about these people, these poor, innocent, potentially innocent people who are political opponents rotting in Indian jails, James? Yeah, it stinks, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And, as you touched on there, the international community has to come together and make their voice heard and take a stand instead of, shaking his hand while his government's behind you pickpocketing your wallet. So,
yeah, it's human rights. The abuse of human rights in India is shocking, which actually leads me on to my second story. This is it's a terrible story, this, but I wanted to raise it because I think it needs to be highlighted. This is a story about marital rape in India, and it has been going on since colonial times. And it's a story about that was this was released on the newswires actually over the last 24 hours. It's an investigation highlighting something that's been going on for a long time in India. And the story is headed up by this poor girl. She's now 19, but at the time she had an arranged marriage at the age of 17. And she, with her husband, her new husband, who had been arranged for her, on her wedding night, she was a virgin. And she said to her husband, look, please, take it slowly, be careful, be gentle. And he said, no, the first night is very important for us men. He slapped her hard, ripped her clothes off and raped her. And what followed her arranged wedding in 2022 was 19 months of sexual and physical abuse. And for years after, she was raped repeatedly. Now, here's some facts and figures about all this. 6% of married women aged 18 to 49 report spousal sexual violence, according to the Indian government's latest National Family Health Survey. Scaling this up, this implies that more than 10 more than 10 million women have been sexual victims of their husbands in India. 18% of married women feel they cannot say no to their husbands. 11% of women thought their husband was justified in beating her if she refused. Now, where does this come from? Well, under India's inherited British era penal code, now in the old legislation, an exception clause stated that sexual acts by a man with his own wife, the wife not being under 15 years of age, is not rape. Now, India introduced a new penal code actually this week, but the exception clause remains this exception, although it does raise the minimum age that a man can rape his wife to 18. So basically this law says a man can rape his wife as long as she's over 18. A woman cannot say no to her husband. Now, this law has been challenged, and recently a lawyer, Karuna Nundi, for one of these organisations, the All India Democratic Women's Association, at the Supreme Court challenged this law, and they condemned the clause as colonialism from a Victorian mentality. Exactly. Now, the case has been ongoing for a decade. It's making painfully slow progress, and then 2 years ago, two judges in the High Court in Delhi issued a split verdict. They couldn't decide. One judge, Hari Shankar, said that while one may disapprove of a husband forcibly having sex with his wife, you cannot equate that with the act of ravishing by a stranger. So what he's saying is there is one form of rape where you're raped by a stranger, but you can't equate that to a husband raping his wife. They're not the same thing. The other judge, Judge Shakdir, disagreed, saying it would be tragic if a married woman's call for justice is not heard even after 162 years. Now, Monica Tiwari from the Shakti Shilani, another rights group which supports sexual violence survivors, said marriage should not shield a crime. And this lady said, how can marriage change the definition of rape? Getting married does not take away the rights over your body. And despite the abuse, some women return to violent husbands, fearing for their children and under intense social pressure. So the tragedy of this is basically, in India, they still stick to this really old, very traditional legal definition of rape. And it used to be the same in the West, certainly in the UK, I think 200 plus years ago, where times and culture was very different, where it was legal for a man to rape his wife. A woman had no right to say no, which, you know, today, through the lens of today, is a disgusting, shocking situation. But fortunately, here in the West, in the US and the Americas, I know it's the same. Rape is rape, whether it is within marriage or otherwise. And if a husband rapes his wife, yeah, it is legal rape. It's very clear cut. In India, these poor women now are still subject to this historic, old-fashioned, out-of-date law. They cannot say no to their husbands. It's terrible. It's a very shocking story, this, but it is worth highlighting, James. I mean, thank heavens for women in the West that they actually have their human rights respected now. But India, clearly a long way behind on this one.
Yeah, and that's where the West has definitely taken strides over, decades of changes to the laws, to not only laws, but just the fact of respect between a man and a wife. To imagine that in this day and age, that they can justify it under law, regardless as to whether they are married or not, is just violence, and it is criminal, and that needs to be respected by the courts and the justice system, as well as the laws in India that need to be updated and changed. I mean, for them to make changes and still allow this is just disgusting. It is totally against international law and the respecting of the rights of individuals, men, women, children. Everybody deserves to be respected, and just because you are a family unit does not give you the right to violate somebody else's space and to take those type of steps. So it's just disgusting.
Yeah, it belongs in a previous century, this. And the march of feminism does attract a lot of attention. It does attract a lot of criticism. But actually, the march of feminism across the West has been a good thing in many ways, because it's brought humanity out of this very old-fashioned, this misogynistic culture where, women were deemed as second-class citizens. I mean, they only got the vote not that long ago here in the West. But again, that was because of the sacrifice and the campaigning by very many powerful women's rights groups. But they have achieved an awful lot here in the West over the last century to protect women's rights, not just in this scenario, but in all sorts of scenarios. And now here in the West, we have very powerful equality laws, gender equality laws. Now, feminism has attracted a lot of criticism, because sometimes many have argued it's gone the wrong way. There's been positive discrimination, giving women advantages over men that otherwise is unbalancing that equality. But the good thing now is that we can have this debate here in the West, where we can debate these things. We can debate them intelligently, and we can have these conversations. But ultimately, it all boils back down to this basic, simple human right of a woman to be seen as equal as a man, to gain employment on equal basis, to in this situation to the right to say no and be respected for that, equal in the eyes of the law. And clearly in India, they are still a long way behind this. And how many times on this show and in the past have we reported on these dreadful abuses of and mistreatment of women? Say only yesterday, James, we talked about in Bengal, the mistreatment of women there. So it's a cultural thing. It takes time. It does unfortunately take generations to change the culture of a nation. We fortunately have gone through that evolution here in the West. We do treat women on the whole with a huge amount of respect and as equals, as the Sikh community has. And I say this very often, the Sikh community respects women and is written into their holy scriptures that women are treated as equals on every level. Contrast that with the rest of India. I mean, it's, again, when we advocate for Khalistan, I mean, here's just one very clear area: women's rights. We said it yesterday, and I'll say it again today. Another reason to argue culturally for Khalistan is at least the Sikhs treat women as equals on every basis, and they treat them with utmost respect, James.
I was actually working with a Sikh today, and we were talking about his potential marriage and all of that. But again, he was reiterating the respect and the partnership that they have with their wives and in relationships and the faith. And, it was just very, just reaffirming the beliefs of the younger generation that they have come to that point too, where they understand, but they're also openly talking about it, which I think is important to educate other people.
Yeah. And human rights, how much do we talk about human rights? It's such a big topic. My third story, again, follows this whole human rights issue. I've got to thank a correspondent of ours, Naveen Aryaputri. Thank you for this very interesting input that she sent. Now, Naveen Aryaputri, she's a Sikh based in Texas, in America, and a very educated lady. She runs an institute for independent scholars. She's a professor of English literature with a special emphasis on 20th century American literature. And she has contacted us about this caste story that we've been following over the last few days. Now, the caste system in itself stands as a beacon of the misuse of human rights, of the abuse of human rights. And Naveen has said to us, she actually did her postgraduate on the influence of the Veda on 20th century American literature, so she knows an awful lot about these things. Now, the Vedas, for those who may not know, are a large body of religious texts originating in ancient India. They were composed in Vedic Sanskrit, that very old language, and they constitute the oldest layer of Sanskrit literature and the oldest scriptures of Hinduism. Now, Naveen tells us that caste, this word caste, is actually not organic to India. It is not actually a Hindu word. It comes from Portugal. It's a Portuguese word. The Brahmins were actually originally horrified to hear about caste and wanted to have nothing to do with it. Jati and Varna are organic to the Veda. Jati and Varna are not caste. Now, saying this, she says there is no excuse for how the Hindus behave now, using caste as an excuse for despicable behaviour and pettiness indeed. Hindus actually have adopted both the horizontal caste, which is watertight, and the vertical caste, which is fluid. And Naveen continues, caste was used by the Portuguese to divide and rule, something the British did after them and the Americans after them. And every ruler or government head after the Portuguese, including India herself, Indira Gandhi, was berated for using this same strategy. And then Naveen says it's an interesting topic since a group in the US tried to bring casteism, this whole concept of caste, into US law. Washington state actually passed the law against discrimination based on caste, ludicrous as that is under American existing law. The group tried it in California, and Governor Newsom, although hard left as he is on his policies, rightly said it's already covered under our founding fathers' documents, so said no and refused to sign the bill. It's interesting. And Naveen sent us a very long and detailed breakdown and a load of information on casteism, which we didn't have time to actually summarise and paraphrase for today, but we will hopefully do that. It's such a huge topic, James. And I mean, I must admit, I only understand it superficially. It is essentially, it's a supercharged class system, but the outcome is very visual. The outcome is very obvious. We've seen this video of this one example of this Hindu upper caste Brahmin urinating on a Dalit child. We've seen this Dalit having his head shaved and forced to drink urine by upper caste people. It's a tool that has clearly been adopted by many Hindus to abuse their fellow human beings. Isn't it, James? Nothing more than that. Simple bullying.
And they just use it to treat others like animals, and there's absolutely no rhyme nor reason why in this day and age, again, that we should be taking people's human rights and their dignity away from them based on an archaic and a broken system that didn't, it wasn't fair, and it shouldn't have been in place, generations ago, let alone in today's day and age.
Yeah, and as we had a comment yesterday, although India has tried, to its credit, to try and legislate it out of existence, it's so incorporated into Hindu culture now. It will literally take generations, I think, to remove it, which is tragic. But it's got to happen. It's got to happen. And more importantly, this exporting it to the diaspora, particularly in the States, in the US, where it seems to be exported, it has got to be nipped in the bud. It has to be prevented, and any sign of it absolutely stamped out of existence. It is a terrible, terrible, evil thing. Right.
A big part of it is keeping it in the narrative and the public discussion, and that's how change happens, not only here in the West, but around the globe. We need to keep these uncomfortable discussions going in order to make sure that change is not only made, but that it's enforced and respected everywhere.
Yeah, it has to be called out wherever it's seen, and we will certainly on this channel be doing that. Okay, let us move on to your wonderful comments that have been, as I said in the introduction, been coming in by the bucketful. So thank you for those. Do keep them coming in. It is giving us, it's giving loads of information to look up, talk about, and of course we've had a laugh about some of them as well. They've been hilarious, some of them, but they've also been very complimentary. And as always, thank you so much for the wonderful support that you've been giving us. It really does mean a lot. So yesterday's show, we had a lot of comments about yesterday's show, and Jasleen JJJS says, good afternoon, Angus and James, good afternoon to you. It is not a democracy, but jungle rule in India. It is indeed, isn't it? Where hatred exists in all forms, gender-based, caste-based, religion-based. Then there are multi-dimensional divisions within these divisions. Yeah, God, we talked so much about this. It is, and I hate to really beat on India because, as I said yesterday, I love India. I love the Indian people. There's so much that India has to offer. But yeah, there are problems in India, and we do highlight these. But we must perhaps maybe, James, we should be highlighting more of the positive, I think.
Absolutely. I think, again, it's just, you shake your head and go, all right, we're trying our best to get the information out there, but the comments really help to bring other points of view in and just keep it moving along as well. And, politicians make their promises, but, if we are going to continue to allow them to lie in elections and lie to our faces, then, we've got to demand better of the politicians in protecting all people.
Yeah, and actually ordinary people, ordinary Westerners and ordinary Indians actually get along perfectly normally. There isn't these divisions that exist. I'll go off on a tangent here. I watched a really interesting TV programme recently, and it was one of our famous chefs, Rick Stein, did a tour of India, and he visited every part of India, including the Punjab, and he actually had a fascinating section in the Punjab where he met loads of very well-known Punjabi chefs. And my mouth is watering now when I think about the fabulous curries that he uncovered, particularly in the Punjab. But what really struck me about this programme, he toured the whole of India, and it highlighted some wonderful parts of India, the wonderful cultures, whether it was Kerala, whether it was in Delhi, whether it was in the Punjab, whether it was in Assam. And he highlighted just the wonderful parts of India that have that are so rich in this historic culture and the wonderful people. And as I say, we do knock on India maybe too much in this programme. So for the purpose of balance, I'm saying this because we should maybe highlight more positive things about India, generally speaking. But what that programme highlighted to me was actually all these divisions that we talk about here. These are not ordinary people that are creating these divisions. It's the politicians, it's the elite, and it's the same here in the West. And I constantly berate Western elitism because ordinary Brits, ordinary Canadians, ordinary Americans, we just want to live side by side peacefully. We have no hostility, no argument with anybody else in the world. It's the elite, it's this top 1% of humanity, whether it's in India, whether it's in the West, that create these problems. All we can do is just report on them and try to hold them to account. But anyway, James, we went off on a bit of a tangent there.
That's okay, Angus. I think you touched on a really important point, is that we do see a lot of great things in India and a lot of respect for India. So it's not that we are India bashing or trying to, pick on one person or one group of people over another. We just, we're reporting on the news, but by all means, it's not representative of, we love India, we love the Indian people, whether you are Sikh or Muslim or, it doesn't matter. We are just pointing out the issues that need to be addressed. And yeah.
So this comment continues. There's a lot in this comment, so I'll just quickly skip to the end. Sikhs will never trust Sunak. His recent response to British Sikh MP Tan Desai's question on the safety of Sikhs in the UK revealed his true feelings, his body language. Basically, he fudged it. He didn't answer the question. He just... As we said in yesterday's show, there is no evidence that the British government, particularly Rishi Sunak, a practicing Hindu, genuinely feels protective towards the Sikh community in the UK. And unfortunately, the proof is how Sikhs feel in the UK. They do not feel protected. Simple as that. So. Now, interesting comment from Harpreet Baines. Thank you for this. Ladakh was part of the Khalsa Raj before the British Empire. The Chinese have acknowledged this. Well, this is interesting because we did that very interesting video yesterday in yesterday's show about Ladakh. And this prompted me to think, actually, yeah, I wasn't sure if I knew this or even forgotten about it. And I'm showing up here. This is a map of the Sikh Empire, 1799 to 1849, before the British Empire encroached upon it. And there, up in the far north of the map of the Sikh Empire, the Khalsa Raj, is Ladakh itself. Ladakh did indeed form part of the Sikh Empire. It was a huge empire. Look at the geographical spread of this empire, all the way beyond Delhi to the east, all the way out to Peshawar, the Khyber Pass almost in Afghanistan, and of course the Punjab, the Five Rivers region, and then all the way out to the north to the Himalayas themselves up in Ladakh. So it was a huge territory. Wow, imagine if that country existed now, if the Sikhs got their Khalistan, and that was Khalistan now, what a geopolitical gem it would be, forming that amazing crossroads between the Indian subcontinent, between China, and of course Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran. It's such a hub of potential there, both economically, but both politically, even militarily. I mean, gosh, I have no doubt, James, the West strategically would love that region to be an independent nation that is a friend to the West. You imagine that?
Yeah. And in that video, I mean, there was a short video and there wasn't a great deal of landscape there, but what we did see was just beautiful, majestic, untouched, natural. I mean, it was amazing.
A stunning part of the world. So yes, thank you for that comment and thank you for highlighting that fact. So, we had a lot of comments. Jagtar Singh Johal. So, 3 comments that I want to particularly highlight here. D. Harminder Sekon, one of our regulars. What is the fault of Jagtar Singh Johal? Now, this comment just basically highlights, quickly summarises what happened to Jagtar Singh Johal, for those who don't know. He's been in prison in India for over 6 years. He made a website and uploaded pictures and data of all the martyrs of the Khalistan movement in the 1980s, that terrible period after 1984, this genocidal period where Sikhs were murdered, were extrajudicially killed, is the legal term, but basically they were killed in cold blood by their hundreds of thousands. And he made a website. All he did was document this genocide. He documented who was murdered and who by, and all the evidence to support that. This website became very popular amongst the diaspora. The Indian government discovered it, and they called it a threat to the integrity of India. Oh yes, this legislation, the NSA that we've talked about. And Jagtar Singh was unaware about the intentions of the Indian government, so he came to India for a marriage ceremony. And then 1 week before his marriage, he was picked up from his house and thrown into jail. Basically, he was taken away by ununiformed, plainclothes police who came to his house, arrested him, bundled him to the back of a van, took him off and arrested him and tortured him. Tortured him. I'm sorry, democratic India. Tortured him. He's had no trial. He's been in prison for nearly 7 years. The constitution in India is just a written piece of paper. It's only used to curb minorities. The constitution is only used against minorities. For Hindus, there's no constitution. Even the state-sponsored criminals and rioters of Hindu community easily get bail. Yeah, it's double standards. So, and then this comment was followed by RKS53. Rishi Sunak did nothing to free UK citizen Jaggi Johal, who was illegally imprisoned. Sher Singh, Rishi Sunak, he's the second Modi in the UK. Yeah, so all these comments wrapped up together. James, we've talked about Jagtar Singh Johal. He is this individual. He's a British citizen. And what has Rishi Sunak, what has his predecessors, what his predecessor, particularly David Cameron, what have they all done about this? Absolutely nothing. And I rant about this regularly because it is an appalling affront to British democracy. It's an appalling affront to democracy anywhere that this man went to India innocently to attend a wedding and was basically abducted by law enforcement and has been thrown in jail and has been tortured. Evidence proves he has been tortured by the Indian state and he still awaits trial. And the British government have done absolutely nothing about it. They've talked about it, they've done nothing about it. I do rant about this because, again, it is just appalling. And James, we referred to this earlier in the show about how many others are sitting rotting in Indian jails like Jagtar Singh Johal, who have nobody to speak up to them. At least we're speaking up for Jagtar Singh Johal, but nothing is being done about this. James, it's to us in the West, we would never put up with any citizen in one of our countries thrown into jail indefinitely, would we?
Well, the way the U.S. Supreme Court decision was made the other day, I don't know about that, but overall, no, absolutely not. And for this to be dragging on year after year after year, as a British citizen, there's absolutely no reason why he should still be locked up in a foreign prison, plain and simple.
It is. It astonishes me that, and the other thing actually that I find quite appalling is that the ordinary Indian Hindus, the Hindu majority here, don't say anything about this. It's okay for them. They are not the targets of this. There's a very famous poem that was written by a pastor, a religious person after the Second World War, about the Holocaust, and I can't quote it verbatim, but basically it said, first they came for the Jews and nobody spoke up for the Jews. Then they came for somebody else and nobody spoke up for them. And then they came for somebody else and nobody spoke up for them. And then they came for me and there was nobody left to speak up for me. Now that poem is very often quoted around social media because it's a very powerful poem, because it's a very powerful message. Basically what it is saying, if you don't speak up for a minority against oppression, then one day they will come for you and nobody will speak up for you. And I find it really sad that Indian Hindus, ordinary Indians, don't stand up and say, hang on, this legislation, these two acts of legislation, particularly the NSA, are not democratic. They are not fair pieces of legislation. It gives our government arbitrary power to lock up anybody they see fit indefinitely, forever, without trial, and there is nothing that anybody can do about it. Now, it's all right, again, if you're a Hindu, because they're not coming for you. But what happens if one day they come for you? Who's going to speak for you? What legal process is going to get you out of prison or let you rot there forever? That's the matter at hand. That's why, James, for example, you highlight this scary piece of legislation in the US where the Supreme Court has potentially handed these same totalitarian powers to any US president, not just Trump, but any future US president. If we hand governments these sorts of powers, it only leads in one direction. It's fine if it's a benign president or a benign government, but what happens if one day it isn't? They have the power to come to your house, knock down your door, pull you out of bed, throw you in jail, and your family will never see you again. That is dangerous, isn't it, James?
It's just unfathomable that it's happening and that it can happen. So once again, that's really the power of the comments here on our show. And when people are putting comments up on the board, whether it is a positive or a negative, it helps to continue the dialogue and the conversation, which is the most important thing, because through dialogue and conversation comes education, awareness, and hopefully it can spur change.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so. But let us change up a gear. Let's be a bit more positive on this show now. Let's talk about the wonderful, powerful contribution of the Sikh community to not just the military, but to our culture and our very existence as democratic nations. I am, of course, talking about the Sikh contribution during two terrible times in history, the two world wars. And as I've said many times, their contribution has been enormous. James, I do believe you have a little something for us today to show this.
I do, and as we were just talking about all of the comments and the importance in our program, this actually was spurred by a comment last week of someone wanting to get some more information about and asking us to share more about the Sikhs and World Wars. So we have created a video. Keep in mind that this was text input into an AI system that is still in training. So there may be repetition in videos or certain videos that are not in line with the actual dialogue at certain points. So excuses for that. It is still a learning process for the computers and the AI as well. But we just thought that the information was what we wanted to get out there. So I hope you enjoy this.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives on Satluj TV. Today, let's dive into a remarkable chapter of history, the Sikh heroes of the World Wars. Picture this. Over 83,000 Sikh soldiers fought bravely in World War I. They were part of the British Indian Army, deployed across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Their bravery and commitment were unparalleled, but it came at a heavy cost. Over 8,000 Sikhs lost their lives during this war. These heroes didn't just fight. They excelled and were recognized for their valor. Sikh soldiers received thousands of medals for their bravery in World War I, including the prestigious Victoria Cross, which was awarded to 6 Sikh soldiers. As if their sacrifice in the First War wasn't enough, the call of duty came again during World War II. This time, the number of Sikh soldiers rose to over 300,000. They participated in key battles across Europe, Africa, and Asia, contributing significantly to the Allied victory. But again, the scars of war were deep. Over 25,000 Sikh soldiers laid down their lives in World War II. Their sacrifices were not in vain, as they were once again recognized for their bravery. Sikh soldiers were awarded numerous medals for their gallantry, including 10 Victoria Crosses. The contribution of Sikh soldiers in both world wars is a testament to their courage, loyalty, and sense of duty. Their sacrifices helped shape the world we live in today, and their legacy continues to inspire generations. So, next time you think about the world wars, remember the Sikh heroes who fought with unwavering bravery and commitment. Thank you for watching Perspectives on Satluj TV. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe for more insightful content. Jai Hind. Hello and welcome to Perspectives on Satluj TV. Today, let's dive into a remarkable chapter of history, the Sikh heroes of the World Wars. Picture this. Over 83,000 Sikh soldiers fought bravely in World War I. These men, hailing from the Punjab region, were known for their martial prowess and indomitable spirit. They were part of the British Indian Army, deployed across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Their presence was felt in the trenches of France, the deserts of Mesopotamia, and the rugged terrains of East Africa. Their bravery and commitment were unparalleled, but it came at a heavy cost. Over 8,000 Sikhs lost their lives during this war. These sacrifices were not just numbers. They were stories of valor and dedication. These heroes didn't just fight. They excelled and were recognized for their valor. Their acts of bravery were often the turning points in many battles. Sikh soldiers received thousands of medals for their bravery in World War I, including the prestigious Victoria Cross, which was awarded to 6 Sikh soldiers. This recognition was a testament to their extraordinary courage. As if their sacrifice in the First War wasn't enough, the call of duty came again during World War II. The Sikh community once again rose to the occasion, answering the call with even greater numbers. This time, the number of Sikh soldiers rose to over 300,000. They were a formidable force, known for their discipline and fighting skills. They participated in key battles across Europe, Africa, and Asia, contributing significantly to the Allied victory. Their presence was crucial in battles such as El Alamein, Monte Cassino, and the Burma campaign. But again, the scars of war were deep. Over 25,000 Sikh soldiers laid down their lives in World War II. Their sacrifices were immense, and their stories of heroism are etched in history. Their sacrifices were not in vain, as they were once again recognized for their bravery. Their contributions were acknowledged by military leaders and nations alike. Sikh soldiers were awarded numerous medals for their gallantry, including 10 Victoria Crosses. These medals were symbols of their unwavering courage and dedication to duty. The contribution of Sikh soldiers in both world wars is a testament to their courage, loyalty, and sense of duty. Their legacy is a source of pride for the Sikh community and an inspiration for all. Their sacrifices helped shape the world we live in today, and their legacy continues to inspire generations. The stories of their bravery are passed down through generations, keeping their spirit alive. So, next time you think about the world wars, remember the Sikh heroes who fought with unwavering bravery and commitment. Their contributions were pivotal in shaping the outcome of these global conflicts. Thank you for watching Perspectives on Satluj TV. We hope you found this journey through history enlightening and inspiring. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe for more insightful content.
Wow, what a great tribute. Thank you for that, James. So there you have it. That was Perspectives. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. We are receiving some great ones. We do love to discuss them, as you have heard. So do keep them coming in. And don't forget, if you'd like to record a short video message on anything relevant, do send it in and we would love to hear what you have to say. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satludgetv.com on any news items that you'd like to highlight that we might have missed. But in the meantime, thank you so much as always for watching Perspectives. It's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from James.
Thank you for tuning in. Leave your comments and share some of your photos from Canada Day. And of course, for our American friends, July the 4th is coming up. So share some photos as to how you're spending the day with family, friends, community. We'd love to see them. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.